Hello and welcome to this panel discussion on startups. With the signing of the Abraham Accords, much is being done to promote economic cooperation between the UAE and Israel. This includes setting up a $3 billion investment fund headquartered in Jerusalem. Investors in both countries are moving to strike details in a business environment transformed by the diplomatic breakthrough. One key sector that is likely to bring together the economies of the nations are startups. So, how will collaboration between Israel, often called the startup nation, and the UAE, which boasts an active startup ecosystem, increase business opportunities? We'll be discussing this and more with our expert panelists. My name is Emma Brain. I'm from Gulf News, and I'll be your moderator for this session. And I'd like to welcome our guests for this discussion. We've got Uri Gabai. He's the co-general manager and vice president of strategy at Startup Nation Central in Israel. Hanan Harhara Yafei, she's the CEO of Hub 71 in Abu Dhabi, and Netalie Nadivi, she is the partner at Triventures venture capital fund of Israel. First of all, a lovely warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining this panel session today. Hanan, if I can start with you, please. Could you please give a brief overview of the UAE startup environment, especially Abu Dhabi, and its contribution to the country's economy?
Great, thank you, Emma. So the UAE and mainly Abu Dhabi has a very forward-thinking government, and they have laid out a clear strategy as part of their agenda to innovate and move their economy away from oil and gas into a knowledge-based economy. And Abu Dhabi is home to Abu Dhabi Global Markets, ADGM, a award-winning international financial center that was set up by the UAE with the aim to be a catalyst for transforming the financial services sector by providing a progressive business and regulatory environment that is really designed to support startups and technology-based companies to be set up in the UAE and grow out of the UAE. And it is really part of Abu Dhabi's government's commitment to innovation and to transformation that the 50 billion accelerator program, Gadan 21, was established and set up. Hub 71 is a flagship project of Gadan 21, which is a tech ecosystem based in Abu Dhabi that is mandated to support startups, founders, bring together regulators, policymakers to really support entrepreneurs and help them set up their businesses and unlock the market for them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Uri, if I can come to you next, could you tell us a bit about Israel's high-tech sector? And it's an industry that has earned it the nickname, the Startup Nation. So if you can tell us about that, that would be great.
Yeah, so thank you, Emma. So definitely, we deserve the name Startup Nation. It started from a book from 2008 by soul singer Dan Senior, I think was yesterday on the conference. But it's an ecosystem that evolved very much from just startups. Today we have, besides the entrepreneurial spirit, also almost 400 multinational corporations operating in Israel as tech hubs, as R&D centers. So definitely the startup, and then technology, deep technology is very much part of the Israeli innovation ecosystem. I think two very besides the entrepreneurship and the deep technology, there are two elements that are ingrained in the Israeli tech center, which is the close link to international financial markets. Most of the investments in the Israeli high-tech originates from outside Israel. Okay? Around 85% of the money comes outside Israel, so very strong connection to global markets, and it is very, very market-driven. Okay, it is an industry that going 30, 35 years ago, maybe the roots started from a collaboration between government and industry, but today it's very, very much market-oriented, software-based, very versatile. You take the deep tech, you take the entrepreneurial spirit, market-driven, connection to international markets, all of them. You have 600-700 new startups every year. That's a very vibrant ecosystem and very adaptive. Okay, just one sentence about adaptive. Look, in the beginning of the year, we were all, like the entire world, we were shocked by the coronavirus and what will happen to our, precious tech industry. Our data, the Startup Nation Central Finder database, indicates that it was a record-breaking year for Israeli tech companies. We almost reached the landmark of $10 billion investments in Israeli companies. If you told me that in May, I said, okay, there's no way that this ship will keep sailing so fast, and it's only because it's adaptive. It's adaptive. It reinvents itself, and as Hanan said so beautifully. I mean, we're moving from the 20th century was all about oil, 21st century all about tech, software innovation.
Mm-hmm. And Hanan, if I can come back to you, why is the new partnership between the UAE and Israel a win-win for startups and SMEs?
So since the announcement of the normalization of the ties between UAE and Israel, we've already seen quite a lot of deals that have been signed with the purpose of boosting the economies both in Israel and the UAE. Right now, the UAE is, over the past couple of years, really positioned itself as a thriving ecosystem for startups in the region. It is more than 1/3 of startups in the Middle East and North Africa outside of Israel are based here in the UAE. And we think that over the past, especially because of COVID, there has been fast digitalization of quite a lot of efforts and acceleration in the way the business, the governments are working, that there's a huge opportunity for startups from all over the world, including Israel, to tap into this market. So we feel like there could be a huge opportunities for startups in Israel to tap into the growing market here, but also for the startups here to tap into the very mature and advanced and sophisticated startup ecosystem and technology ecosystem in Israel.
Okay, and Uri, what specific advantages of the Israeli startup sector are there that can benefit the UAE?
So I think that when you have a strong software-based ecosystem, it has applications in a versatile industries. Okay, so just looking at the complementarity between the Israeli ecosystem and what's happening in the Emirates, you can think about fintech. Okay, the financial center, the very sophisticated, very strong financial center in the Emirates, and the boosting fintech scene in Israel. We just had an explosion of fintech investments and fintech technologies in the last 3 or 4 years. Investments are almost $2 billion just in fintech. So you can think about these kind of collaborations. And another real, we're all Middle Easterns. Middle Eastern, it's a beautiful region, but it's desert. Let's admit that that's practically a desert. Okay, so everything about desert technology, water technology, all these kinds of collaborations around mutual challenges, linking them, bridging them by technology, by innovation, based on trust, based on doing things together from a mutual place of learning and forming this kind of collaboration. I think endless potential.
And Netalie, thank you so much for being patient. And if I could come to you now, off the back of what Uri and Hanan have been saying, how do you see this partnership between the UAE and Israel playing out for startups?
So, I'll start and I'll say I think it's really unique and special, and I feel very lucky that in our lifetime we're able to see something so unexpected with so much potential develop before us. And, I think actually we're more similar than different. So similar population sizes, we're investors in the healthcare segment. Our country's healthcare systems are public, social with emerging private sectors. We both value innovation and encourage innovation and education, higher education. And clearly by seeing in this panel, we also encourage the prominence and leadership of women in strong places. And so I think that that's a very good foundation for building commonalities and opportunities. And also independently, both our governments have been very supportive of innovation. And I think one thing that will help to encourage collaborations, especially in this initial phase where we're testing the waters, will be bilateral programs that from both governments that encourage the collaboration of the younger companies to work together, as we have in Israel with other countries. And, we're very close geographically. It's a huge opportunity, and we need to learn the ropes of each other's countries. And the best way to do that is through on the ground practical partnerships.
Wonderful. And Hanan, if I can come back to you, the UAE's got a very vibrant startup scene led by Abu Dhabi and Dubai. In the past, funding was one of the biggest challenges that local entrepreneurs faced. Has that changed in recent years, and how do you see that moving forward?
Funding is critical for and having the availability of capital is absolutely critical to having a vibrant tech ecosystem. Here at Hub 71, we have seen quite a lot of commitment from VC funds to be based at the Hub 71 and contribute and invest in the startups. Now we have the VC funds that we have at the Hub are both the local VC funds in addition to international and global ones. According to a Magnet study recently, the capital that was invested in startups in 2020 has matched to that one that happened in 2019. So there is no slowing down of investing in startups. Now, having said that, it's ultimately the availability of funds continues to be an important component. And the more fund is available, we will notice a better pipeline of technology companies and startups that are available here. So one of the things that we have started over the past couple of weeks is seeing quite a lot of interest from Israeli funds to look into the startup scene here. And in addition to looking at the funds here that now we'd like to tap into the Israeli tech ecosystem. Going back to Hub 71, we know that we are backed by some of the great partners that are looking at investing and providing investment opportunities into the tech ecosystem in general. So we have over $500 million that are available to be invested in this space. So it's quite promising, and it is an area that could be quite a lot of potential for partnerships in that area.
Fantastic. And Netalie, what are some of the core future sectors that are seeing traction in terms of attracting funding during the pandemic, and how do you see venture capital funds flowing into the UAE?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because we've been investing in the digital health space for about a decade. In Israel, we were the first institutional investor in this space. And we knew it was coming. We started as actually a medical device investor, and we very quickly understood that the major transformation in this space is going to come from data-driven solutions. And so what this 2020 has done, people are saying 2020 was a very long decade, right? and that's, it's very cynical and sarcastic, but actually from healthcare's perspective, it really was a decade in terms of the acceleration of adoption and the willingness and openness and increased awareness on how these solutions are not a nice to have, they're a must have. And so particular areas, of course, during this year where we saw some increased activity are telehealth, remote care services, something that we've been talking about for many years, accessibility of healthcare, how and where we receive services, mental health and mindfulness solutions, anything that has a social component. So for example, socially driven fitness and nutrition platforms where you can really communicate with peers like yourself and encourage each other, even if you can't meet up in person. And in terms of, encouraging VC investments, in both directions, I'll say that as VCs, we are committed to our investors, our limited partners, to deliver substantial returns, which means when we evaluate opportunities, we need to look at things that can become big potentially. And so it encouraged, as we do also for the companies in Israel. Israel is a small market. It is not the market, that the companies are building towards. They can develop and innovate in here in Israel, but they really are outward looking. And so in the same way that we encourage the Israeli opportunities that we evaluate to think big, I would say the same would be true of those companies in the UAE, to really think about solutions that can transcend borders. And just to touch upon what Ori said earlier, a few areas that we're very interested in is just really the verticalization of healthcare. So seeing not just fintech solutions, but fintech solutions for healthcare, and changing how and where we pay for healthcare, for example, insurtech for healthcare, cyber for healthcare. So we're seeing a lot of opportunities in bringing the best of the tech world into healthcare.
And Uri, if I can come back to you, since the landmark Israel-UAE deal was announced on August the 13th, the average number of Emirati users on the Startup Nation's central platform has increased. So what are the opportunities for joint ventures, collaboration, and for UAE companies to use the cutting edge technology to gain an edge in the market?
So we definitely, when we look at searches at the platform, the Startup Nation Center Finder platform, we can see a lot of searches from the Emirates around cybersecurity, extremely strong. Okay, it's 2020, everybody's engaging through digital media, obviously, so that demands cybersecurity. Second, agri-tech, going back to what I've said before, I think that's very important. And following on what Natalie said, digital health. Okay, we're all concerned about our health 2020, and I think this trend will continue. One thing that I see as a very strong point of collaboration is artificial intelligence, AI. That's probably the electricity of the next few decades. Very, very strong activity in the UAE. Around it, I think it's ranked third globally in government strategy. Israel is not doing that good on that front, but is doing very good in R&D. And AI demands both sides, demands the policy, demands the infrastructure, the regulation, the big data, and demands the technology, the R&D, the developers. I think the combination here could be tremendous. Let me add just a personal note, something that might be more wishful thinking, but I think education tech. That's not the first thing that we would think. That could be an amazing thing, that we can build bridge, not just between professionals and companies, just between communities. I live in Jaffa. It's a very mixed region. I have a son, a small kid in kindergarten. His two best friends are Matan, a very Jewish name, and Muhammad. There's nothing to it for young kids. They don't understand the barriers, and I just envy them sometimes. And I wish that we could build bridges around education, bringing communities together to actually build just more than just business, build these bridges as communities.
That's a lovely thought there, Uri, and we hope for that in the future too. And Hanan, if I can come back to you, which are some of the key areas you see the partnership between Israel and the UAE playing out for startups and SMEs, especially with the government's push to diversify beyond oil?
I would build on what Uri had mentioned. There are quite a lot of sectors that fit naturally into the strength of the ecosystem in Israel and to the demands within the region here. We can talk about health tech, like Natalie has mentioned, edutech, like Uri again has talked about. There are issues of national security, artificial intelligence, medical. One of the things that's worth highlighting is the anecdote is, the joke is COVID-19 did to digital transformation what Note CTO was able to do at their organizations, right? So there's with this huge digitalization that's going on at the government level, and that's driving it for the market as well. The opportunities are really endless in quite a lot of these sectors.
Okay, and I've got a question for all of you next, if that's okay. So right now the opportunities seem endless. Lots of examples have been given by all of you. But what are the challenges? What potentially could go wrong? What are the risks and obstacles that could be faced? Hanan, I'll stay with you for this one first.
Great. I think the one point to highlight is the Israeli ecosystem is mature. It's well established. They have been through they've been through the different challenges, and they have a very good understanding of the nuances needed to start up an ecosystem. Whereas in parallel, the one in the UAE is relatively new and it's growing. So there needs to be that awareness of understanding that we are at a different stage. So knowing of that, and then paying a special attention to focusing on early stage investments, early stage startups, and the needs of entrepreneurs at that point. So I think that would be the one obstacle, is the calibrating of where we are that we need to be aware of.
And Natalie, if I can come to you, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think, with any new relationship, you need to really commit and build multiple layers of trust. And this takes time. Early success stories will help to help break down any mental barriers and accelerate continued partnerships. But I think, the responsibility on both our sides is to be very aware of this and to be very consistent with how we're behaving and interacting. And, we are in a state of euphoria right now, and that will, start to level off. And then the real work begins. And that takes real, true commitment. And
Uri, what are your thoughts, please?
Yeah, so asking what can go wrong in 2020, I think that's a legitimate question. Many things can go wrong. I'm just following on what Hanan and Natalie said. Look, now it's a euphoria, it's a flood between both countries. We have to take this flood into, a smart irrigation system between both countries, if you use that analogy, okay? It should be not just, looking just for the quick hookups here. We have to have strong relationships based on real opportunities. Eugene, my boss, Professor Eugene Kandel, launched 2 days ago, at the beginning of the conference, a community, UAE-IL Tech Zone. I think that's very important, that's to build, again, following on what Natalie said, to build that relationship, to build that trust. We always say, if you want to do something, spend some time by doing nothing together. Okay, just to build this community. And I'm very optimistic. But again, now it's a flood. It has to be more, more thoughtful, more targeted, and basically smarter collaboration.
So my final question to all of you then is, what could regulators as well as entrepreneurs, VCs and other investors do right now to kickstart this cooperation? Uri, I'll stay with you for this one to start.
Yeah, so I'm going to touch on another subject that Hanan mentioned. I think Israel has a very unique innovation model, going back 40 years. And I think there's a lot of lessons learned from the Israeli experience that we would love to share. I'm pretty sure, we have a lot to share, and we have a lot to learn from the experience of what's going on in the Emirates. Basically the same fundamentals, small countries, small markets, but a lot of smart things going there. So I think that regulators, VCs, besides the business front, should also collaborate on a joint effort to build a strong, smart innovation ecosystem.
And Natalie, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so earlier I talked about the dual government innovation encouragement programs. I think that this is, viewed by startups as low risk capital, but that has potential high return for entrepreneurs. I would encourage them to look for their counterparts in the other countries and try to establish collaborations where 1 + 1 is greater than 2. And with the VCs, the investors, similar to what we do in other countries, we're proactively developing relationships with other funds, because when we invest in a company in the United States or in Europe, I want to do it with a local fund, as they do when they look at an Israeli company, because in a minute I can give them all the background on the company just by either from my own database or from a few calls. So we need that on the ground collaboration, and I think it requires all of us to be very proactive and reaching out.
And Hanan, if I can get the final thoughts on this from you, please.
I would echo what both my fellow panelists have shared. It's really the spirit of collaboration. VCs, regulators, entrepreneurs, everyone needs to collaborate to really bring this partnership to life.
Fantastic. Well, on that note, I'd like to thank you all so much for taking part in this panel session on startups and collaboration between the UAE and Israel. I'd like to say a huge thank you to our panelists, Uri Gabai, Co-General Manager and Vice President of Strategy and at Startup Nation Central, Israel, Hanan Harhara Yafei, CEO of Hub 71 in Abu Dhabi, and Natalie Nadivi, she's partner Triventures Venture Capital Fund in Israel. Thank you so much to all of you for your wonderful insights on this topic, and we look forward to moving forward with great collaboration in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.